Hello, everyone. It's Larry Johnson, your host for Eight Principles Voices. And I have with me a delightful young man I've met recently, Justin Throupe. I pronounced his name earlier. And he is head of a Christian school, a classical school in Eastern Virginia. And he and I shared an afternoon in Palm Springs recently with a little two cigars and whiskey. And that was kind of nice, kind of broke the atmosphere there, broke the ice. And I discovered him to be a really interesting guy. And I just thought, hey, you're going to be on my podcast. And because, I like interesting people who are honest and open. And he is definitely one of those. He's a, he's a Virginia Tech guy who isn't an engineer. Think about that. But he's in this classical Christian school, and he probably looks younger than he really is, which I think is kind of disgusting. But we'll go with it. Welcome, Justin.
Well, thank you for having me, Larry. And yeah, it was an enjoyable time out in Palm Springs a few weeks ago.
Yes, yes, it was indeed. So, just tell me now. I understand, if I remember correctly, you're from a military family. Is that correct?
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force, so served in the Air Force. He started out desiring to go to college, went to a semester at Penn State, and realized that wasn't for him and not something that he wanted to do. So he joined the Air Force, and he desired to be a pilot, but found out he was colorblind. So he quickly quickly lost his dreams of being a pilot, but still served faithfully in the Air Force for 20 years. And as a result, I was a military dependent for a long period of time. And when he retired, we moved to Virginia and settled down here in Eastern Virginia since
Okay.
1999.
All right. So then excuse me, were you at abroad at all, or just in the U.S.?
One of my dad's assignments was in the Azore Islands off the coast of Portugal. And so I was around the ages of 4 to 6 when we lived there. So
Okay.
tough assignment, Azore Islands there.
Yeah. Do you
Beautiful
remember?
place.
Do you remember it?
I do. I do have some fond memories of it, some core memories of just time there. It's very windy there. That's where actually here on the East Coast, we deal with the winds eventually from the Azore Islands in the form of hurricanes throughout the summer. Um, so it's very windy there, and I remember we had a woman who helped around the house, and she had a son that was the same age as me, a Portuguese family. So um, had a friend who was Portuguese and spoke Portuguese, which I spoke very little of, as of course as a 4 and 5 year old. And so, but I do have fond memories of playing with him and playing on base, and just primarily the wind that was there uh, throughout
Well,
my time.
that has certainly stayed with you. When you have experiences like you did, you had a young playmate from a totally different culture and language very early. That experience really broadens a person. You see people in different lights than if everything is just like you down the street in middle class suburbia. You know,
Yeah.
it. Um, I had a playmate like that when I was little. It makes a big difference in your life. So you came back here, you settled in Virginia, and you went into education. You always wanted to go into education. I know your college education is in education.
Yeah. No, I didn't actually always have a desire to go into education. I first, I was not the most stellar student when I was in high school. I enjoyed the culture and the activities and did not apply myself academically as much as I could have. I did enough to know that the grades I needed to bring home, so that way I did not get in trouble, and excelled in the things that I was interested in, but did not really uh, attempt to further myself in the things that I was not most interested in school. And so I didn't really develop a love for learning until college, which ironically I didn't have a desire to go to Christopher Newport University, where I ended up going at first. I thought about going into ministry, and my parents gave me wisdom and sound advice. And I was looking at this uh, school that was housed out of a local church in our area, and it was not an accredited school. And um, I was just trying to follow what I thought the Lord was leading me to. And My parents said, no, you can't go do that. You need to go actually to a university. And if you want to do that later on in life, that's fine. But and being still under my parents' household and wanting to honor and obey them, I did that. So I attended Christopher Newport University, and it was there that I really fell in love with learning and a whole liberal arts education that they offer there, and really just started diving in to education at that point. And then figuring out while I was there, I wasn't ready maybe to go into ministry full time. So what were some other alternatives, and really enjoyed and loved history. And so I became a history major, and then received my master's in arts of teaching for Christopher Newport University, and started working and teaching in a public school.
Okay. All right. Man proposes, God disposes.
Yeah.
And your parents were wise to say, Justin, here, step back a little bit. Let's get a little broader perspective here. And then if that's still the direction you feel called to, you can go to that. So they were tempering the urgency of youth there. So then you
Yes,
were
they were.
so then you were then really gung ho for Jesus early in your life. I mean, you had to be an adolescent?
Yeah, yeah. I was raised Catholic. So my family, we were the Catholic family that went to church on Easter and Christmas. But growing up in the Catholic Church, you faithfully have to go to CCD on Sundays or Saturdays whenever the local church has them. And so for us, that was Sunday afternoons and Sunday evenings. And so I always had a desire to know God from an early age, but didn't really understand um, grace and the depth of my sin and what He's rescued me from till I was about in junior high school, and then furthering along into high school, having a kind of more richer, fuller understanding of that.
We call those C and E Christians, as Christmas and Easter.
Yes.
This showing up for those two times. Now, but for you to have a sense of yourself that young, 'cause you were brought up in the church. You were baptized Catholic. Um,
Yep.
were you confirmed in the Catholic Church?
I was. Yeah, it was one of those moments in my life where at that point in time, I identified as an evangelical Christian, and but still being under my parents' household, would attend uh, CCD education, and would still receive the sacrament of confirmation because I was still under my parents' house, and
Mm-hmm.
thought that was the right way to be able to honor them.
Mm-hmm. I know a young man who's in his mid 30s now. Maybe you'll get a chance to meet him. He runs a marketing agency, and he grew up in the evangelical Catholic movement.
Mm,
Um, and his father is a professor at Dallas University. Yeah, University of Dallas. I knew that wasn't right, which is
okay.
a Catholic liberal arts school in Dallas. And you and he could have some interesting conversations. He's still very much devout Catholic, but he considers himself evangelical.
Yeah.
So you'd find that interesting. So you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah. I'm the oldest. I have two
Okay.
younger
All right.
sisters, 4 and 8 years younger than me.
Okay. So how did you get into this Christian school? So you were in a public school,
Yeah,
and
that's
but
a great
now
question, and a,
see now you're in a classical Christian school, which would require a certain level of broad learning, or
yeah.
else you could never do it.
Yeah, so fast forward in life, married, and we have our first child, and I'm well in my career in public education, and I taught for 5 years in a public school, and then during that time, it was kind of the make or break. Or is education going to be a career? Is it a ministry? Is it am I called to do something else? And that's how I came into Virginia Tech and their education administration and policy degree. So I got my EDS from Virginia Tech, and became a high school administrator in Williamsburg, Virginia, at a high school up there, and was serving and enjoying it, and just really growing, had great mentors, really, really great public education there. And but when it became time for my son to start going to school, my wife and I started exploring, okay, well, I was working about 30 to 45 minutes away from home. And the school system where we live is not that strong. And so sending him to that school system was not something that we were considering. So we started looking into private education, which was not anything that my wife and I ever considered in the past. We were both educated through public school and had great educations and really grateful for a lot that we were able to grow up in and learn in. But it was not what we wanted for our son. And so we started looking around and, I have 2 degrees in education at this time, and never once did I hear anything about classical Christian education. And so my wife and I continued to read and learn a little bit more about classical Christian education, and thought, we really think that this is the best education that there is, and that this is hearkening to the past and the way things that were always done. And so why did we ever turn away from it? So we started looking for classical Christian schools, and found and knew of Summit Christian Academy here in Yorktown, Virginia. And so we enrolled my son when he was in kindergarten. And I was still working in the public school up in Williamsburg, Virginia. And then within a couple weeks, as part of being a family at Summit, we receive a magazine from the Association of Classical Christian Schools called Classical Differences. And in that magazine, the first one that I had received, there was short article in there. And in that article, it was a former principal at a public school who is now working at a classical Christian school. And essentially, he described the differences between public school and classical Christian school, between evangelism and discipleship. And I had really enjoyed the evangelism aspect of working in the public sphere, but could never really get down and drill down to the discipleship aspect, especially within my position and the time that I was spending with the students. And so that was really appealing to me. And fast forward a week later, I was at a meeting, and I put my administrator hat on as a parent and asked a question in the meeting. And at the end of that meeting, the head of school at the time said, "Hey, our upper school principal might retire in a few years. Had you ever considered maybe coming and working over at Summit?" And I said, "Well, actually, I just read this article last week, so maybe let's have coffee." And so that was about 7 years ago now.
You came there as a parent and you asked some directed, intelligent questions. And guess what happened? Hey, you want to
That's
come
right.
help us? See, that man recognized a quality when he saw it. Oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. We need some talent. And that was 9 years ago. You said
About 6, 7 years ago.
6, 7 years ago. So as a classic in the classical tradition, at what point do they start teaching the ancient languages, Greek or Latin?
Yeah, so our students start studying Latin in third grade.
Okay, and
And then
and then they go ahead.
I was gonna say they're required to take it from third all the way to eighth grade. And then when they get into ninth grade, they can, at Summit, they can continue on in Spanish, or they can continue on in Latin. And then eventually the capstone for a Latin program is a year of Greek, their senior year.
Okay, so when do they have enough Latin to read some of the ancients? I'm just okay. This is pretty in depth, but like Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This is English, by the way, Justin. I can't do it
Yeah.
in Latin.
No, I could not either. That's one of the beauties about working in a classical Christian school, and your children going through it, is you learn so much right alongside them, and it's a beautiful thing. And you wish, you had the same education that my children and the students here at Summit are receiving. So they will do, in sixth and seventh grade, they'll start doing some primary source readings and translations. But in our curriculum, they will not read through a entire piece of classical literature
Okay.
in Latin.
Okay. So pieces of Plato, pieces of Socrates, but no complete volume of any of their
No
works.
complete volume. That's right.
Okay. Well, in terms, classical education, I had a professor say to me, this was when I was at Yale. He said to me, Larry, you need to know that there's been nothing fundamentally new in the world since the ancient Greeks and Jesus of Nazareth. And you can speak to that, can't you?
Yeah, that's been part of the journey that I've been on since enrolling our son in a classical Christian school and
Mm-hmm.
then working in a classical Christian school, and just you know the harkening back to the way things were. Like I said, I had and have 2 degrees in education, so I could tell you about Dewey, and I can tell you about how we got into the model that we're in, and that was the model that I was familiar with, and this very utilitarian view of education of there's a process, and everything is basically for us to produce, to go be good citizens, to go get a job, and again,
Industrial
this very
education.
industrial education and utilitarian view, and as opposed to this beautiful understanding of education of liberal arts, to free the mind, to free you to be able to continue to learn, and for you to be cultivated into a flourishing human being. And what does that look like, and what does it have mean to be in awe in your learning, and continue that as you continue to grow older, and what that enables you to do. And by God's grace, he'll call you into something that you still might be utilitarian and serving a purpose, but at the end of the day, that that's not your primary means, and what you are after, and what the Lord has for you. So it's a completely different way of thinking, that the telos is completely
Do you
different in a
do you use
classical Christian model.
do you use the Socratic method?
For our dialectic and rhetoric students, mostly in our rhetoric program. So that's our 10th through 12th graders.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go through the Socratic method, and also go through Harkness discussions oftentimes in their classes.
Okay. So where do your right now? I mean, you just maybe you can't. Where do some of your students graduate? What do they do? Where do they go? What's next for them after they leave?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of our graduates this year, very exciting. She's really, really always wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. That's been her dream, and she started at Summit in K4. So she's been with us since pre-kindergarten there, and she had a tough choice this year. She had to choose between the Air Force Academy and West Point. So she
Oh,
actually she actually swapped and fell in love with West Point and the campus there up in New York, and so she's actually going to go be a cadet at West Point. So our students, they go off all over the country. We our goal is we want to prepare to be able to prepare them for whatever the Lord is calling them to, and whatever school that may be. For some, that might be, they're going to go to community college next year, and then they're going to go off to a great college program that we have in Virginia. Whereas others, like this other student, she had a tough choice to make. So we want to prepare our students to be able to access their first and primary choices, wherever that might be that the Lord's calling them to.
mm-hmm.
And
You
for some, that's
have,
we've had students just go into the military and just enlist in the military as well. So a majority of our students, probably about 95% of them, go off to a college, university. Some of them will go to a local community college, and some also will enlist into the services right after high school.
well, I would think that one of the principal benefits of what you provide is the ability for these young people to think and think critically,
Yes,
to be able to evaluate ideas as they're presented, which is a tremendous, tremendous blessing to be able to everything that comes to you in the modern world is rushing at you. Okay, how do I make sense of this? How do I discern what is real,
yeah,
what is not real? And of course, as we know, Christianity fares very well in that environment because we can see what's real, what's not real, how it all fits together.
that's right.
Um, and so that you know, you prepared them to make that next step, whether it's in a trade or a profession, or the military, whatever it might be. Your goal, I think, is to really prepare these young kids for life, how whatever that
Yeah,
means. um,
yeah, and that's, Larry, that's right in line with our, our vision here at Summit of preparing students academically, socially, and spiritually, and equipping them to discern truth and articulate their faith and serve others for the glory of Jesus Christ. So,
mm,
they have to have that discernment element, and of course, that's what we're teaching them and helping them with, but then also to be able to articulate it and then serve wherever the Lord's calling them to do, and whatever He's calling them to do, but also, to be engaged in culture and to continue to be a Christ follower. And so, yeah, that really sets them up to flourish wherever they go to after their time at Summit.
mhm. So how old is the school now?
We're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, so really really
Mm,
excited about that.
okay. All right. So where do you think you're going? Not you personally, you, the school, are going from
Yeah,
here. You want to grow? You want to just do more of the same? What would you like to do?
yeah. So we have around 250 students right now. So our goal is to continue to grow that. We have a desire to have two full, robust classes per grade level, and if we have that around 12 to 15 students at our grammar school and about 15 to 20 students at our upper school, that'll put us around 350 to 400 students. So our goal is to continue to grow to that size. Um, and being that we're 30 years old and we've been here for so long, and there's been just a really strong foundation forged here at Summit in classical Christian education, it's exciting because we're at an age in our school where we're now having, the students who graduated from Summit years ago and went off to college, they're now our teachers. Our principal is a graduate. Our upper school principal is a graduate of the school, and went to college and started another career, and then decided to come back and teach at Summit, and then grew into becoming our principal. And then the same is true for our families. Having second generation students, so not just that first generation of students that have been here, but they're now parents, and their children are now coming back, and their
Okay.
grandparents that were once parents are now back. And so it's really really neat to see that generational aspect of an
Hmm.
organization. And so I'm looking forward to the next 20 25 years of that, and continuing to see the third and the fourth generations, and continue to
Okay.
see how the Lord continues to
All right.
move in and bless and grow Summit, and continue to flourish our students and see what they get sent out to, whether
Okay.
that's them coming back to Summit or going out into uh, culture and community.
Well, the fundraiser in me says, oh, lots of legacies. That's what they call it
Yes.
in the fundraising world. Lots of
Yep.
legacies. Um, I want to shift gears for a minute, and I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit. All right,
Yeah.
you can handle this. All
Yeah.
right,
That'll be okay.
and we're going to talk about personalities. Hey, is there a place that you're willing to share where where you had what I will call some sort of crisis of faith? And
Mm.
could you describe that to me? Maybe what precipitated it and what happened to resolve it to move forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think for me, I had definitely had one in college, um, where I didn't really have an understanding, probably the best understanding and articulation of the gospel, and really understanding what Jesus had done for me and what He had saved me from. I probably had a little too much righteousness about me, and thinking that,
Really?
like you,
I couldn't
like
imagine that, Justin. I
yeah,
couldn't
like
imagine at all.
like you had mentioned earlier of, yeah, I came to know the Lord when I was young, and you know, I don't think I was a Pharisee, but I wanted to be a good Pharisee, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And that wore me down. And it brought me to a breaking point because you can't live up to that standard.
Not for
And
very
so,
long, anyway. It's a
no, not,
wear on you. Hmm.
yeah. So it was wearing on me, quite heavily. And so I was starting to go through some crises of faith in that. And my wife and I dated for a little while in college, and we broke up. And I didn't really know what was going on, and I was starting my student teaching, and just stressed and overwhelmed with life. And I knew to trust in the Lord, but um, I was trying to do it on my own strength and my own effort still,
You
and
thought
didn't really
faith
have a
was you thought faith was performative.
yeah. So I didn't really have a good understanding um, of the gospel, and so going through that time and that experience, I don't think I ever, it wasn't a
Bless you.
complete, excuse me, turning away and running away from the Lord, but um, it really helped refine my understanding of grace, um,
Hmm.
and and changing my perspective from some of the things that you were talking about, Larry, in the beginning of, um, there's nothing that I've done to deserve God's grace. I can't have earned it. And so when you have a good understanding of that, that really changes your mentality of when you see someone or you interact with someone or you talk with someone, I'm no better than any of them. In fact, I'm probably worse. I want to, look at things like Paul. I don't I would like to think I'm the chief of all sinners, but I'm probably not as humble as Paul was in that, to come to that realization. But it does change your outset and your mentality, and I think it positioned me really well to help serve students um, after college as well, of just having a true heart uh, for them and trying to help them understand and come to know the Lord, and get to this level of discipleship that I'm now able to have with my students here at Summit.
Let me build on that. You're the head. Um,
Yeah.
do you get involved with student behavior issues?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, then you know, and I know what adolescents are like.
Yeah.
They're driven by impulse. They are confused. They're easily influenced by their peers and society. Um, and of course, in the case of males, their prefrontal cortex isn't even developed yet, and
Right.
so they're prone to all sorts of we might call idiotic behavior. Just
Yeah.
total,
The,
like how could you
the,
do this? You know,
there's still a reason insurance is expensive for a young 20-year-old.
yes, it is for a good reason.
Yep.
So when and I know that it's a Christian school, you have behavioral standards. I understand that. So how do you deal with someone who's a pretty much normal adolescent but strays into the wrong direction? I'm sure, for instance, that you probably have language restrictions. That if someone's spewing a lot of profanity, that gets people's attention. This kind of thing. How do you deal with that? I mean, are you instructive, and are you attempting to help people understand, or is it very kind of cut and dried? You say certain things and you're out the door.
Yeah. No, I mean, we would not, just outright dismiss a student. It's really getting to their heart and getting to, discipline is love. So it's right to discipline students and for us to be disciplined when we're out of line. But trying to get to the heart and understanding and the root cause of what it is that's going on, and trying to help them to be able to see that themselves. And we always talk with our students about wanting to be quick to repent and quick to restore if there's any damage done to someone else, or any products or anything. So looking at their heart, and is their heart softened enough to be able to recognize their error, and do they really want to change and turn away from it? If it's something where you tell them that it's wrong and they don't care and they just want to keep doing it and going back to it over and over again, well, we're not going to tell someone that they can't be here after that first time, but if their heart is not changing and they're not repentant in
Hmm.
it, then there would come to that point where a student would get dismissed from the school.
Hmm.
Um, and my heart for our students in the midst of that is still, how are we loving and caring for them as
Hmm.
being an image bearer? They're made in the image of Christ and the image of God, just like I am. So how are we? How am I still maintaining a relationship and making sure that they might be flourishing wherever else they might be?
Hmm. You ever have to deal with alcohol, drugs, weapons?
Not so much in my context here, but when I was in public school, that was almost a daily occurrence.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Um, so you like where you are then?
Yeah, I really, really, really love it here at Summit. It's been refreshing. It's been energizing. I work with a great team. Our teachers are fantastic. Our families and students are wonderful, and we're still all sinners, so we still all mess up and we get things wrong, and our students mess up. But when you are founded on truth of God's word, and you're all chasing the same thing, uh, it really brings a lot of beauty to what you're doing. And so I'm really, really grateful for that.
Okay, all right. Is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't discussed or you'd like to bring up? Nothing's off the table, Justin.
Oh, um, no, I mean, I think just grateful for the time and the opportunity to be able to share part of my story. And um, it is like you mentioned, when I first started teaching, I always wore a shirt and a tie. One, because that's how my mentors trained me. But two, so I wouldn't be mistaken as a student. um, so, um, I enjoy, uh, the aspects of dressing up um, and that's just something that's always been ingrained in me as a professional and as a teacher for my time in student teaching.
Okay.
Um, but it is sometimes funny, as you mentioned, walking around or going through an airport or going anywhere professionally, and someone asks what I do, and I explain what I do, and they, well, aren't you like 27, 28? And it's like, no, not there. There's a little more gray coming into my hair here these days. So um, yeah, I'm grateful for the time and uh, the experiences that the Lord has given me, and just the opportunity to be able to share part of my story. So grateful for that.
Okay.
Thank you,
All
Larry.
right. Well, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um, everyone, we've been having a delightful conversation. Justin Throupe and myself. He's the head of Summit Christian School, a classical Christian school in uh, Yorktown,
Yorktown, Virginia. Yep,
Yorktown, Virginia, the end of the Revolution. Okay, I
that's
presume you've
right.
seen. I presume you've seen the battlefield. Uh,
I was I was just there this past weekend, so yeah,
okay,
plenty
all
of
right.
history here in Yorktown, Virginia.
Yes, there is. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us. And we'll be with you again very soon.